The Balaturim on the opening pasuk of Sefer Vayikra is well known. He explains why the word Vayikra appears with a small aleph, and he said that Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to focus on the word Vayikar, not Vayikra that Hashem called him, but Vayikar, that he coincidentally came to him the same way it says by Bilam, Vayikar Hashem el Bilam. It wasn't a kavua thing, it wasn't established, it wasn't something that happened on a regular basis, it was something random, and Moshe was trying to be humble and teach that he too was of that level. He too wasn't worthy of having Hashem speak to him consistently, but we know that it wasn't true. We know that Hashem did speak to him consistently, and in fact, the Vayikra Rabbah points out that we learn Moshe's anava from this very point, that Moshe Rabbeinu did not enter Ol Moed, despite all of his greatness, until Hashem called him Vayikra Hashem el Moshe. That's where we learn his greatness, so it makes sense, therefore, that Moshe, at that very line, was trying to teach us his midah of anava. And it explains why the word Vayikra is where we're learning about Moshe's midah of anava, but it doesn't explain what happens next. The whole next couple of prakim are about korbanot, and what does that have to do with anava? And the Gemara in Sota Daf Hey writes, Amar Yeshua ben Levi, that the nemuchei haruach, those who are humble, are beloved in front of Hashem. Why? When there's a Beit HaMikdash and someone brings a korban ola, they get the reward for the ola. They bring a mincha, they get the reward for a mincha. They get the reward for that which they brought. But however, someone who is humble, ruach nishbara. Humility qualifies as bringing all of the korbanot, because the true korbanot of Hashem are ruach nishbara. Humility qualifies as all of the korbanot. Just like korbanot are a way to attain kapara, so too anava is the way to attain kapara, and more than that, anava is the way to avoid chet. On the mystical view, Rav Chaim Vital writes that anava has the same gematria of the same samech mem aleph lamed, that representing the Yetzer Hara, that those who have anava aren't going to be tempted by the Yetzer Hara. In a number of places, the Gemara points out and refers to the Yetzer Hara as seor sheba'isa, the yeast, something that makes a person minupach. It makes a person feel like they're greater than themselves. It makes a person feel like, I don't have to deal with those rules. Those rules don't apply to me. I am so much greater. I am not bound by Hashem's mitzvot. And therefore, that's why it's considered to be the Yetzer Hara. And Rav Chaim Vital is pointing out that someone who has anava isn't tempted by the Yetzer Hara. Points out that, in fact, the gematria of anava is kuf lamed aleph, the same as of the shem samach mem. And the Tehillim kuf lamed aleph, David HaMelech writes, the very opening line, Mizmor la David Hashem lo gavali bi, v'lo ramu einai, v'lo alachti b'giloto v'niflot mimeni, where David HaMelech is pointing out the importance and the power of anava, of humility. But at the end of the day, what does that have to do with korbanot? And there's this fascinating Tashbetz who points out that, based on psukim in Sefer Vayikra, that how do we know that an animal was kosher? She'adam sheyesh lahavir lo mashmesh hayad al gabe behema be'oda chaya. Im tashpil haaretz tachat yado vaday kashera. An animal that when you roll your hand over its back, it puts its head down, you know that it's a kosher animal. And the Ramah quotes this in the Yoreh and says, don't rely on that to know which is a kosher animal or not. But the idea is that a korban is supposed to bring someone lidei anava. And I think one way to understand this, there are various opinions on why korbanot, that a person is giving up something that's monetarily worth to themselves, Takadosh Baruch Hu, but I think another perspective might be that specifically we're looking to nature. We're taking something from nature and we're turning it into a davar kadosh. We're taking an animal, we're being makdish that animal, and now we're using that in the sense of kedusha to attain our own kapara. And what does that have to do with anava? The Rambam writes in the opening to Mishnah Torah, how does a person attain avat Hashem? By looking around the world and seeing the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu around the world, and that's how a person will say, wow, it's so amazing, and be enamored by it. And realize that everything's done for a purpose, that there's someone behind everything. But it also, at the very same time, when a person realizes everything that's around, when he realizes that all of nature has a purpose, that everything is put in precisely because it needs to be, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in charge of everything, I then understand my place in the world. I then understand that, wow, there's this whole world out there, and I can use parts of it. And nature is here, and everything is positioned in the exact appropriate and purposeful way. That I understand that my role is somewhat less significant. I understand that I have to understand my role in this world, that it's so much greater than I am. It's the very epitome of the opposite of Seor Shaba'isa. Seor Shaba'isa makes something menupach with full of air. You can just pop that, and all the air comes out, and the person realizes where they are in the world, and that's the awe that develops. That's a sense of anava, and perhaps that's why this lesson is taught by korbanot, because korbanot are where we are supposed to look to nature, to look around the world, to see that every single thing has this purpose. These animals that otherwise shouldn't be relevant to kedusha, shouldn't be relevant to Torah, have a purpose. Everything has a purpose. When I realize that, when I recognize the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put everything here for a purpose, then I have a purpose too, and I have to understand my place. And that's the lesson of Anava, to teach us that we have our place, and in doing so, I'll attain tshuva and kapara, because I'll realize that my place in relevance to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, my place in having to follow His mitzvah. Shabbat Shalom.